when Trump took office, and I started paying a lot of attention. Actually, right before that, during his campaign, I just saw a portion of America just come unhinged, and acting like I've not seen people act like in our country in massive groups, and then that developed into BLM riots and Antifa. When you're talking about who runs the country, the deep state, all these things that we're talking about, transgenderism, pedophilia, in the end, nobody seems to be able to figure out who's pulling all the strings. And, I am a Christian, and I am to the point where I do think that there is a very good possibility that this is beyond any of our comprehension, and this is a battle of good versus evil.
Shawn Ryan is a former Navy SEAL in the United States and a CIA contractor who hosts the Shawn Ryan Show. It's recently ranked #1 on Spotify podcast. And amazingly, people listen to it out in rural Australia, let alone in city Australia. So it goes way beyond the US. Shawn, thanks very much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm intrigued as to how a guy like you grew up in country America, you ended up in the SEALs, contracting the CIA, now running very popular commentary. What turned your attention to politics, if you like, and to public policy and what's happening in the world as a commentator?
I've always followed politics loosely, just from, my previous career as a SEAL and a CIA contractor. But I think I really started paying attention probably around 2016, for when Trump took office, and I started paying a lot of attention. Actually, right before that, during his campaign, I just saw a portion of America just come unhinged, and acting like I've not seen people act like in our country in massive groups, and then that developed into BLM riots and Antifa and all these other things, and so really caught my attention, and I started tracking everything, and the woke agenda came about. We can go into that, and then COVID, was kind of the final straw when I really realized, okay, might be a good time to start paying attention, a lot of attention to what's going on, and ever since then I've been pretty glued to it.
Let's come back to America in a moment. I'd like to go back to some of the places you've been to, because you must have seen some pretty unhinged stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what is the normal state of humanity? We think in the West it's all very comfortable. Many of us, particularly in my country, we seem to think you can afford to go to sleep because peace is the norm, but it's not the norm, is it? You've seen some pretty ugly stuff.
It's definitely not the norm. I mean, even if there's no violence in a lot of the corners of the world, there's still a fight just to survive daily life, and that became very apparent with just about everywhere I went in service. Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Haiti, all over the place, South America, Central America, and there are a lot of people in the world that live without anything, and then you throw the violence on top of that, and war, and I mean, people of Afghanistan, that's all they've ever known.
For centuries, it seems. What do you think drives that restless, endless desire just to fight and to be violent and to look for somebody to do over? Because that's the impression you get of some of those places that you've been to.
Mm-hmm. I don't think they're all like that. I mean, I think it is with that particular region of the world, it all seems to stem from religion. And and if we look back through, world history, a lot of wars seem to stem from some type of religion. And so those are some of the most dedicated fighters in the world over there, and they really believe in their cause and what they believe in, and minus the fact that they don't have a significant amount of technology, they're very resourceful, they're very dedicated, and they're very effective.
It's your belief that religion stands behind a lot of violence. Is that to say that all religion is a problem?
No, I don't think so. I think it is. There's extremists in everything, and these would be extremists of that particular religion.
So, I think you could argue that America's philosophical base has been largely Christian. It's moving away from that, but you'd have to say that America its critics won't always agree, but then they're often blind. America's been a great force for peace and for good. I come from Australia. We'd have been wiped off the map in the 1940s if it hadn't been for America that used arms to great effect. And having won in Europe and then in Japan, VE Day, VP Day, what America did was pretty amazing stuff. They helped Europe rebuild. $13 billion, that was a lot of money in 1948-49 for the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe. And you think of MacArthur in Japan helping them build a democracy. So you built an amazing society here, really, an incredible society, a prosperous one that was reluctant to get engaged in that great conflict, but when it did, and when it won, it helped rebuild rather than push down and subjugate the peoples that they'd won over. And then they have presided over, really acted as the world's policeman ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So you get very different results from belief systems, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you do.
So you're now a podcaster, and there's a lot of reach in it. What is it that you think people are looking for with podcasts that they're not getting from mainstream media or other sources now?
I think people don't know what to believe anymore, and I think it's a combination of things. I think that people are craving some type of authenticity. Ever since the birth of social media, everything has gone fake, phony. Everything's a lie. You can't trust anything, and people became very authentic and started catering to what they think that people want to hear and see, rather than just stay true to themselves. And that spun out of control. On top of that, I think that nobody trusts the mainstream media. Nobody really trusts much of any media these days, and so people are just exploring different avenues to find real information. And for whatever reason, I think a lot of people really trust the information that I put out, and I think that's the big draw. And vulnerability. We also from social media, I think this stemmed, but everything you see on social is fake. And so when I started the podcast, I started with former colleagues of mine, and I don't know how it is in Australia. I couldn't imagine it's much different, but veterans really struggle. There's a suicide epidemic going on here right now, and especially amongst the veteran community and law enforcement, firefighters, a lot of public service. And so what I wanted to do is bring men on, and women who had been to war and had faced those kind of challenges coming home, trying to reintegrate into civilian life. And by doing that, they get very real, very vulnerable. They talk about how bad life got after service. They talk about cheating on their wives. They talk about suicide attempts. They talk about drug addiction, alcohol addiction, how their whole life crumbled in front of them, to include my own, and then what it took to get them out of it, how they got out of it, what they're doing now. And by doing that, I mean, these guys come on and they really, and women, and they're giving you a glimpse behind the curtain that nobody gets to see. I mean, when people think of special ops, intelligence agencies, they think that, that these people are invincible. And this shows them a very different, dark side of what's actually behind that curtain. And, by doing that, it brings a lot of people hope. And I think they realize, one, maybe I don't have it as bad as I thought I did, because here's this guy that went through all of this. And for the people that can relate to, what people like me have gone through reintegrating, and they see me come out of it, and they see the lows that the lows that you go through, I think that gives other people who are in that same journey a lot of motivation and realization that they can pull out.
Can you tell us a bit about your own experiences, how you were shaped by what you saw and how you shook off the despair afterwards?
Man, that's a lot of stuff. I think I learned a lot of stuff by my time in service, and it did shape me as a man. And I think the one thing that I really took away is accountability, being able to take accountability and own your mistakes, and that's carried me through a lot. Even earlier Sunday this week, I made a mistake, and I had put some information out on my show that was not accurate. And as soon as I found out that wasn't accurate, I made a public statement saying that the information that came out of the show was not accurate, and I wanted to correct the record immediately. And to be honest, I thought it was going to destroy my entire operation here. But in fact, it actually did quite the opposite. And by taking ownership of my mistakes and admitting that there was false information coming out of the podcast, I think it actually did quite the opposite and brought a lot more credibility to what I'm doing here, because I am able to admit, my faults.
I think probably people do. We're all aware we make mistakes. And we're all aware that we try and cover them up and other people try and cover them up. And when you're honest about it, that probably does really bring out a bit of better angel, not just in the person doing the confessing, but the one hearing it as well.
It definitely appeared that way. And it always has. I've always been one to fess up and own my mistakes and errors. And I mean, that's how we learn, and like you said, we all make mistakes. I think letting your ego get in the way of coming clean, it just never works out in the end.
My own father was a serviceman in the Second World War from Australia. He was involved in the North African desert, which was the first turning point. First time the Allies really won against the Germans. They pushed them under the Africa Corps under Rommel back out of Africa and secured the sewers and the trade routes and the oil fields and what have you. But he was so badly wounded, he was one of those people literally given up for dead by the medicos. But he was still alive the next morning. It affected him for the rest of his life. He would wake up right up to the end of his life from time to time, screaming at the top of his voice, "Get down, you fool, get down, you fool, you're going to get hit." And then they were hit as he tried to drag a fellow back under cover. The Germans had found the range. The point I was going to raise is that that made me aware that people do things for you in the dark of the night while you're sound asleep that you don't know about. That's dirty work, horrible work, dangerous work, frightening work. So it was bad enough for him, but I've often thought, I feel really sorry for the Vietnam servicemen in my country and probably in yours. You know, they went off to do a war at the behest of their government, which they didn't want to go to and which the population didn't support. And they were brought back under cover of darkness. In one case, literally in Australia. They brought them back in the ship, and instead of a ticker tape parade saying, "You're heroes, we are brave men, you've done what your country asked you," they were taken off under cover of darkness. That must have been really traumatic. And I guess there must be times when you and other people who have served like you have, you feel pretty unappreciated. You've done these things, and you come back into a community that doesn't know what you've done, isn't really interested, doesn't appreciate it.
It definitely can create a enormous amount of resentment, and I felt that when I left the SEAL teams in 2004. I could feel it, and then I got back into contracting at CIA, and I felt it there on my off time at home, and to be honest with you, I got so tired of watching everyday Americans sit at a bar and drink and critique everything that I and my colleagues were doing overseas that I decided to leave the country. So I left the country for 5 years, and it was good for me. It was good for me to leave because I didn't have to hear that anymore. And then I came back and decided to speak out against it.
Speak out against what? Because you would still be, like me, a believer in Western freedom and the need to defend it. So you're speaking out against what particularly?
All the corruption that we see today. You know, you brought up America and World War II, and I do think that I mean, without a doubt, we were there for the right reasons. Ever since then, I can't say that with 100% certainty. You know, I do think that the response we did after 9/11 was the correct thing to do, but that war should have never gone on for 20 plus years. We probably should have never been in Iraq. We should have never been in Vietnam. I think one thing that America learned during World War II is war makes a lot of money. And we were even warned, you know, about the military-industrial complex before it ever even was a thing.
By Eisenhower.
Yep.
One of the greatest military leaders of all times. Interesting that you should say that. I was in government, a government that committed to joining you in Afghanistan because we believed it was terrorist training ground central and it had to be disrupted. I think there were reasons for going in, if I may say so.
I'm with you. I said at the beginning, I think we were doing there for the right reasons. And then at some point in time, it flipped.
We were there for the wrong reason.
I think we were there to make money. I mean, we weren't near as effective as it went on and drug on, and ROE started getting loosened up, and it became a hearts and minds war, whatever that means. But because of the stipulations from the U.S. government, it felt like we weren't even there. We a lot of times we didn't even know exactly what we were doing there anymore, because. I mean, just for example, I think it was around, around 2011, 12 timeframe. We were supposed to do the biggest offensive push since the Battle of Fallujah in Iraq, in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. And I remember when the rules of engagement came out from the Obama administration, the rules were, if an enemy combatant shoots at you and then drops their weapon, you are not allowed to return fire. And that is chopping the legs out. That was the U.S. Marine Corps who were going to lead the offensive. That was their rules of engagement. And not only did they chop the legs right out from underneath those guys, they also demoralized them, because now, instead of effectively war fighting and taking Helmand and ridding it of thousands and thousands of Taliban and Al-Qaeda, now they're worried about, am I going to go to jail if I kill an enemy combatant? And when the bureaucracy bleeds into war, what is the point? What are we doing here? Why are we sitting here in idle mode? Why is our government more concerned about our enemy combatants than they are about our own people?
I once spoke to a young Australian SAS officer who poured out his heart about it. And he knew I'd been in government. It wasn't an easy moment for me, I have to say, because he said, I came to the belief that I didn't have the government's back. And he said, there's nothing harder for a young man to be out there risking his life when he doesn't believe that the people who sent him there are 100% behind him for the right reasons. It's a pretty hard thing to hear.
It is.
So I kind of sympathise with it. And yet, you know, it's so complex, isn't it? Because that, if you don't mind me saying so, that very, very messy withdrawal was a disaster for the people of Afghanistan as well. Mm-hmm. Well, most people in Afghanistan, unless you're a warlord, you wouldn't want to live there now.
No, you wouldn't. You know, and I think that was, I think that kind of solidified what I'm saying here. You know, the way we left there, the way we abandoned those people, the way we abandoned our allies. I mean, a lot of people don't understand the complexity of what was happening in Afghanistan. A lot of people thought that we were at war, I think, with the actual country of Afghanistan, and that's obviously not what it was at all. But you know, we did a lot of good over there. We were extremely effective, and the Afghan people actually got to see a glimpse of what actual freedom looks like.
Of what it could be.
Yep. And then we just abandoned them. And not only did we abandon them, we turned the country over to a Taliban regime, which now things are even worse than before we got there. And not only did we do that, we didn't even burn or destroy classified material when we left. So all of those people that we trained who fought alongside us, I mean, people like me, I came home from war and went back. Those people live there. They don't come home. That's a 20 plus years of constant war, no breaks, no vacations, none of that. And, you know, a lot of the people over there, they gave it everything they had and continue to do so. But, you know, we left all the documents, we left the pay stubs, we left biometrics, we left names, we left addresses, we left family members, photographs of everybody who worked with us at all of those bases. And so when Taliban took over, they got all of that information, and now they are actively hunting down anybody who worked with U.S. coalition forces, and they are, you know, killing them, raping their wives, killing their kids right in front of them, and then killing them. And we allowed that to happen.
Beyond imagination, really, isn't it? That should happen. With the horrendous challenges that the globe now faces, threats to peace, what a former Australian Prime Minister called the axis of evil that's emerging, the unholy alliance of China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia, believing that we're weak and degenerate and ripe for takeover, or at least dominance, to lose our place, if you like, the West loosely defined, as the leaders and imposers of some sort of global order. It seems that perhaps the greater threat still, though, is our own internal decay, our own loss of direction, of commitment to freedom, commitment to our own values. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
I would 100% agree with that. I don't know exactly where it all comes from. But I think it's a combination of things. And one, I think that Westerners, probably Americans more than anybody, take things for granted. I believe it's less than 1% actually serve in the military. And so we have a very self-entitled, naive population who hasn't been outside of our own borders to see what the rest of the world looks like. And because of that, our culture is crumbling. I don't think people understand how hard it can get. And I know people don't understand how hard it can get. And they haven't seen the ugliness of not even just war, because you can't expect people to understand that, but even just across the Mexican border, I mean, you can see how a lot of those people live, and we're in for some really tough times. We are in for some really tough times because there's nowhere else to go.
I'm one of those derided baby boomers, I suppose. I'm a mid-baby boomer. I was too young for Vietnam, didn't see war, just lived in the shadow of somebody who'd seen the horrors of it. I get the sense that there is a bit of a recentering going on amongst some of the best of our young people. They're starting to say, this is getting pretty serious. Do you see that reflected in the podcast that you do and the interactions you have with people? There is a bit of a reemergence of understanding and leadership amongst the best of our young?
I definitely see it. I wouldn't say it's the entire generation.
That's why maybe best is not quite the right word, but
Yeah.
I'm looking for hope. I'm saying, I suppose I'm hoping that there's a cohort of people who will get it coming through before it's too late.
I mean, there's definitely a fight brewing,
Yeah.
know, and, we're seeing, I mean, just in the U.S. alone, there's a massive migration happening, and lines are being drawn. I don't know where this ends, but you are seeing droves of people leaving places like California, Washington, New York, Oregon, all these places, and they want out of there because they have voted in politicians that have ruined every aspect of their life. Their safety is a concern all of a sudden. Business is, you can't even conduct business in a lot of these places anymore. And so they're moving to places like Tennessee, Florida, Arizona, Nevada, they're Idaho. Everywhere you go in this country, states are complaining about the migration of people coming especially out of the West, California, Oregon, Washington. And those people are looking for freedom. And on top of that, you're also seeing a lot of states aligning on different topics. I think you're seeing conservative states go far right conservative, and you're seeing blue states go far left. Let's talk about the gender stuff that's going on with transgender, and in Washington, they've passed laws where they can confiscate your kids if you don't. They're doing surgeries on kids that are 8 years old, and you can't even drink in this country and make the decision if you want to drink alcohol until you're 21. But you're going to give an 8-year-old the decision. You're going to enable an 8-year-old to make the decision if he wants to regender themselves. Come on. And if you as a parent don't fall into that, then the state has the ability to confiscate your kid. On top of that, we see pedophilia I can't even believe we're having this conversation, but there are states that are trying to take the name pedophile away and replace it with MAP, minor attracted persons, as some type of a sexual identity that all of a sudden they want to make acceptable in everyday life. And so, on the right, you're seeing these abortion laws, whether you like it or not, whether you're pro-abortion or not. I mean, they are extreme. I mean, now you have conservative states. Some states are passing laws where you can transcend state lines and go arrest and charge the individual that had an abortion. And so what's happening is, in my opinion, is we're seeing lines being drawn, and people are picking a side. It's to the point where you almost have to pick a side now, and because the lines, because the sides are becoming so extreme, it's making it seem like nobody is left in the center. And I think that where this could head to, and it's not going anywhere good.
Extremism can be very ugly at both ends of the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're seeking to be a voice for clear thinking, evidence-based thinking, without going to that sort of extreme that's tearing Western countries apart.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people have lost the ability to critical think. And, and you see, I can't even name a news outlet that I don't know what side they lean towards. And I think that's fine to have your own opinions and biases. I mean, obviously I have my own, I'm sure you have your own, but if you can leave some of the rhetoric, people want to be told what to believe in now. And so that's what the media is doing a phenomenal job in, is telling everybody what they need to think and believe in. And how they do that is they tell you, they label every issue that we have. Instead of just talking about the issue and leaving left, right, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, whatever the adjective that you want to insert is, if you could just tell the story, it would force people to actually think on their own and make their own decision, rather than hear what their party's stance on the issue is. But I don't think they want people to think on their own. They want the control. They want the manipulation.
Looking globally again for a moment, it is a very dangerous world out there. What should America be doing militarily? What should the West be doing militarily, do you think? I mean, everyone took a big peace dividend after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990s, a long time ago now. Europe's been very reluctant to step up again. Britain hasn't been too bad, but the other countries, Western Europe particularly, they've not done much. Defence spending's come down as a proportion of GDP very significantly here. Chinese now have more ships, less tonnage, and they're probably not as good, but more ships than America. Once upon a time, American policy was that America ought to be able to handle two significant conflicts and a minor one at any given time, which was an idea they got from the British Empire before them. Probably couldn't do that anymore. What should be done, and is the willpower there to address this issue, do you think?
I don't think the willpower is within Washington. I think the willpower is within the people, and the people are going to have to step up. I mean, there's a small percentage of people in this country that even vote, and people are going to have to step it up if they want to see change. But as far as what I think the Western world should be concentrated on, especially America, would be we need to get our own house in order fast, because we can talk about China and Russia in Iran, in BRICS, in terrorism, but none of that matters if we don't get our own house in order. And there are so many catastrophic failures within America right now, from the border to the outrageous spending to funding two sides of war to, I mean, you name it. I don't think we're doing much of anything right. And and what are we even defending if we don't have our house in order? We have runaway politicians. We have corporations that are controlling all of our politicians. We have other countries sending spies here to sleep with our politicians. China's paying our politicians off they develop them businesses in China, and because China's a communist country, the money strain starts with the shipping, or with the business, and then guess what? If the politician doesn't play ball or vote the way China wants them to vote, then they take the business away because it's a communist country and they can do that. And there goes the money train. And so unless people start waking up and paying attention and looking at it, who's running this country, we're just spinning our wheels with all these other threats.
Who do you think is running the country?
I think it's a combination of things. I don't, when I try to get to the bottom of the deep state all the time, but I never really get too far. But I mean, my current conclusion would be that it is a combination of foreign influence, corporations, lobbyists. I think money runs the country. The influence that money has over individuals is what's technically running the country. And, I don't remember who said it, but I heard this a long time ago. And I've always thought about it. I am a capitalist, but I've always heard that capitalism will eventually eat itself. And I think we're seeing that right now.
Well, capitalism will eat itself when making money and wanting your own personal interest in that outweighing the idea that you're working hard for your family, working hard for your community. Money, I suppose it's the old saying, isn't it? It's a kind servant, but a cruel master. Mm-hmm. While it's a servant, that's good. Mm-hmm. When it becomes a master.
I mean, this is just for example. I mean, when big pharma lobbies all these politicians, I mean, that's why we can't get any, that's why our food is all poisoned in this country, because they want preservatives in the food so that it has a longer shelf life so that they can make more money. It's not about the people anymore. It's about who's going to pay me to pass this law. And I think it's the same with medicine. The FDA has got to be one of the biggest scams of all time. And I mean, there are all these natural medicines out there that are working wonders on people. Like, I'll give you an example: psychedelics. Psychedelic therapy is proven to. I mean, it's almost a cure for PTSD and traumatic brain injury, and it's scientifically proven now at this point. But yet, it's preventing veteran suicides, it's preventing depression, anxiety, addictions, it's curing addiction. I mean, I went down and did psychedelic therapy, and I had a massive drinking problem, full-blown alcoholic. I did that therapy. From the day I did that therapy, I still have not had a drink. It's been over 2.5 years now.
You look fit.
Thank you. But and just about the majority of my friends and former colleagues that are doing well today, psychedelics played a major role in that. But we got to go out of the country to get it, and I think it's the oil tycoons. It's all of these lobbyists, that are controlling our government and foreign lobbyists, and that's who I think is ruling the country.
Can I make one observation as somebody who's served in a parliament for a long time, Congress, Senate, in your language, different names for the mechanisms of democracy? If we get too cynical, you'll believe that there's no one there trying to do the right thing when there are. But if you're not careful, you disincentivize good people from being prepared to have a go. Same with the military, by the way. Exactly the same thing. You've got real trouble now attracting young people into the military because they think they're not going to be valued, they're not going to be appreciated. Why should they put their neck on the line for a society that doesn't believe in itself anymore? This is a common problem. I'm not just signalling out America. It's a big problem everywhere, including in mine. Attracting people into the military and retaining them. There's a political area as well. How do we actually say to people that are really trying to do the good thing, the right thing, rising above that herd, recognise their motivation? Because we've developed such cynicism now, we think they're all crooks. I'm generalising, but I think that's a real problem. You've got to get behind the good ones, got to encourage them, got to empower them to make a difference.
How do you think we do that?
I think that it begins with recognising that and seeking to reward and compliment the people who are trying to do the right thing. It requires a bit of discernment and a willingness to say, here's someone, even if you don't agree with them on everything, but they're sincere, they're trying to do the right thing, they're trying to fight for a better country.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I do that.
See, I've always said scepticism's a healthy thing, but cynicism, if you're not careful, just corrodes, just makes the problem worse. I only say that because I was in conversation with a very, very fine man who I think has looked aged beyond his years. I obviously don't need to name him, because he's been trying to do the right thing for a long time and it's been very tough. He gets a lot of flack, but he's obviously well motivated. He's obviously a trustworthy person. And it's really serious when someone like that feels discouraged and doesn't want to carry on.
Yeah. It's a fine line, because I think at least for Americans, I think we're on the precipice of it's either we're going this way or we're going this way. And once that decision is made in this upcoming election, that's it. I think it's going to go.
I'd love to come back to that in a moment. Before I do, one of the great shifts in America's always been a great ally of Israel. Now your campuses are full of people who apparently think that terrorist groups are resistance fighters. And there's a lot of thinly veiled and sometimes not thinly veiled anti-Semitism in Western societies that really distresses me. What's driven that great big shift, do you think? Because it is a big shift.
I think it is media, and I think the situation in Israel right now is a very delicate subject. I can see it from another perspective. They did wipe out, 40,000 civilians? Is that correct?
In Gaza? Well, they're Hamas's numbers, and they don't distinguish between military and civilians. But, that immediately, to me, raises the question as to who's responsible for that. Is it Hamas? Is it not Hamas? If Hamas had not done what they'd done on October the 2nd, and if they'd not taken hostages and not embedded themselves in civilian facilities like schools and hospitals, who's responsible?
Well, let me ask you this. If a active shooter runs into a school and is killing teachers and kids, and then the police come in and just kill everybody, is it the school's fault for letting that person in? Those people were innocent. A lot of those people were innocent. And Yeah, I mean, I spent 14 years in and out of war, and I do understand there is definitely a war factor where innocent casualties will die, and I'm not saying I'm pro-Israel. I'm not saying I'm anti-Israel. I think Israel's been extremely effective, and way more effective than America was, in finding and killing leaders of Hamas, and I mean the pager thing was incredible.
Extraordinary.
And the speed at which they've been able to, I mean, I don't even know how many leaders that they have eliminated in just a little over 1 year. And that is extremely impressive. And I think that the entire world could take notes from how they did that. I
was interested in your view on that professionally.
Yeah, I think that it was extremely effective. I think that they have some explaining to do for how many civilian casualties there were.
Well, you could say the Allies maybe have some explaining to do because a lot of Germans were killed in their cities and so forth. But it was surely right to get rid of the Nazis. It's surely right, and in everyone's interests, including yours and mine and our countries,
Absolutely.
to see places like Iran and its proxies degraded.
It's
I don't want to make light of those lives lost. Any life lost is a tragedy. I agree with that. The German lives lost, the Japanese lives lost, when those regimes began the most appalling attacks on humanity in the Second World War. They were still a tragedy. But I don't know that anybody would say it was wrong to insist on unconditional surrender by the Nazis after what they did. Let's not forget to the Jews in particular. War is, I mean, as you've said it, it's a horrible, horrible, evil thing.
It is. It is.
And it's always terrible. But it worries me that we're ambivalent about a fellow democracy, whatever else it is. It's a tiny little place of just 10 million people, one of the smallest sort of footprints of any of the country in the Middle East. Many of the other Middle Eastern countries actually, by their silence, seem to be saying, well, we actually think it might be a good thing if Israel pulled Iran down, because Iran's behind all of this.
I'm with you.
President Trump went further. He said, take out those nuclear facilities in Iran and then clean up the mess later. It's a pretty strong thing to say, but I suppose he's reflecting that concern that Iran's very close to having a nuclear weapon, and that would be horrendous. Every other country then would say, well, we'll have to build nuclear weapons. Egypt will. Saudi Arabia will. Heaven only knows who else will. This is a very dangerous time.
Absolutely it is. Like I said, I'm not saying I'm pro or anti. I think they've been extremely effective. All I was trying to point out was there is always another perspective that needs to be, explored. And I can at least understand, that perspective.
It is, as you say, it's very difficult. I'm troubled by, it has exposed, I don't think you can doubt this, a very ugly streak of anti-Semitism in most Western countries, certainly has in ours.
Absolutely. It's everywhere here.
And you touched on BLM riots. They were supposedly against racism. But we now actually find a lot of the very people who were driving that agenda turn out to have locked themselves into the most ancient of all racist tropes, which is anti-Semitism. It's you wonder how we've got to this point.
We got to this point because people are not educating themselves the proper way, and they are being led around by the nose by media that isn't telling them the truth.
Can I ask you, do you believe this can be turned around in your country?
I do believe I believe it could be turned around. I think I don't think it's going to look pretty while it's being turned around. I think whatever it is that you want to say we're going through, I think we are going to have to go through this. and I think it's going to be a fight. I think it's going to be extremely ugly. You had asked, who I think is running the country, and I think, I'd kind of mentioned, it's a combination of things, and we're going to have to fight all of those things, and some of those things are within our own government, and those need to go away.
A very thoughtful guy here in America. We were driving along a highway to an airport. You always seem to be driving to an airport in this country, and he said if he had one thing he could wish for his country, it would be that people could have confidence in the election process. I thought that was an interesting observation. If it's a close election, there's going to be a lot of unrest, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Confidence in your voting process. We've always taken it for granted in Australia. There is fraud, but I don't think there's any doubt. But the mechanisms for picking it up thus far seem to have instilled a fairly high degree of confidence that the process is fair, and if someone cheats, they'll get caught. But it's very contentious here in America, isn't it? And as I look on, I think, what happens if it's really close and it's within the margin, if you like, of corruptibility? It could have been distorted. What will that do? It's an unanswerable question, but you might have thought about it.
I think about it all the time. And I don't know how that's going to turn out. I wish I did. I have my speculations, but I think no matter who wins this presidential race, we're going to see a lot of violence in the streets.
Do you?
I do. I think both the right and the left are at their wits' end. And I mean, we already saw it. We saw it when Trump got elected the first time. What happened, and throughout his entire presidency, we saw what happened, and we saw January 6th as well. However you think of that, and I think that was probably extremely. I think that event was over embellished by the media, but at the same time, we did have a bunch of people storm the Capitol, made Americans look like shit. And so, I mean, there's not really one side that acts better than the other at this point, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be very unstable no matter who wins this election.
One of the things that really sort of has changed is that there was a time when candidates for high office were regularly subjected and agreed to be subjected to grilling by media. Now, what do you really believe in? What are your real policies? What are you really going to do about exploding debt threatening the next generation of our kids? What are you going to do about defence? What are you going to do about the big issues? Now it seems that, I'd have to be frank, to a very great degree, it seems to be possible to avoid that sort of grilling, which leaves the electorate, the voter, really grasping to get a handle on what they'd do if they got there. How's this happened? There was a time when you couldn't. I've been there. Trust me, I know. You knew that you had to accept media invitations to go and be grilled and participate in debates at every level, small town right up to capital city. Because the voter wanted to know what you thought. The media were the people who did the job of, if you like, facilitating that interchange. And you had some chance of explaining who you were. And if you couldn't, you didn't get there. But now you can hide your real personality, your real intelligence, your real ability for the job. And the ultimate example of that, I was in a cab the other day, a lot of anecdotes coming from me today, I hope that's all right, in a cab, and he was anti-Trump. So we got quite a series of reasons why people shouldn't vote for Trump. And I thought, well, I'll just make one quiet observation. I shouldn't be rude. I'm in another person's country. I just said, I must say, if I was an American, I'd feel pretty offended by the fact that the Democrat machine plainly withheld from me the truth about the president's cognitive ability. And they pretended everything was all right until the whole nation saw that it wasn't all right. He conceded the point straight away. He said, yeah, that's true.
He did.
Yes, he did.
That's good to hear, because a lot of people won't even admit it.
Now, after that debate. Really?
Really. I mean, how can you just jump on board with that? I mean, the signs were there the very first presidential debate between him and Trump, because I remember having a conversation with my wife before that debate, and I was really upset with right-wing media, because I thought that they had over-embellished Joe Biden's cognitive ability. I thought that I just thought there's no way that somebody's running for president that cannot formulate a sentence, and right off the bat, right away, you could see it, and I realized nobody's driving this train up there. It's nobody's behind the wheel, and it was. I mean, it was very apparent throughout the entire the entire administration, and then they pulled him, and I don't think anybody changed. Nobody changed, and I mean, this woman didn't even get any votes. How's she the one running? How's this happening? You know, but I think it's really sad where we're at. You know, people just, they cannot see past their own party lines, and from what I see in this country is on both sides is that we've lost critical thinking, and I think that's extremely dangerous, a very dangerous spot to be in.
Do you think the country's universities have let you down? You
Yes.
mentioned critical thinking. I mean, they educate our educators, our school teachers, they send people out into the public service, I suppose everywhere in life.
Yeah,
and,
I think
and
they're
they
doing
were
us
the
a
places
disservice.
where our leaders learnt to think critically, to use your language. So if they're not, if Americans are not thinking critically, what role have the universities played in that?
They played a massive role. I mean, if you don't think like them, then you won't get the grades you need to get your degree. And so it is think this way or you have no place here. And so people fold and they buy into it.
This is still, for all of that, a place where, you know, as I sometimes have the privilege of doing, moving around, you meet wonderful people everywhere. You really do. You meet a lot of people that you don't really engage long enough to know what they're thinking politically, but outwardly they're decent, likeable, warm, hospitable, engaging, and clever. This is a clever country, very innovative country. It's always had a lot of energy. What happens in the world in the next decade or so is going to be influenced by many things, but technology will be a big part of it. And we know that China is getting very good at a lot of technology. So there's a real suspicion they may actually be leading the way on AI. You will have thought a lot about this. Mm-hmm. What do we make of AI, and how do we make certain that it ends up being a kind servant and not the capacity to generate monstrosities everywhere? Any thoughts?
That's a great question. I'm not as spun up on AI as you might think I am, but what I am going to say when it comes to the race to artificial intelligence, because Xi Jinping actually did come out and say that he believes that the whoever wins the race to artificial intelligence will achieve global domination.
Yeah,
And
that's what I'm driving at.
Yep. And so if I would really be paying attention on how we're going to fix this energy grid, and create more energy. I would also say that all of the tech that's being developed by American companies in China, that has to stop somehow. I don't know how they're going to stop it, but that has to stop, because under Chinese law, any technology that can enhance or aid or improve the Chinese military, they own it. They get a part of it. That is Chinese law. And so every Apple, Microsoft, any of these companies that are developing technology in China, China has that exact same technology, and it's totally legal for them to do it. It's a communist country. And so, one, we need to bring all of our tech manufacturing and innovation back into the United States, or at least into countries that cannot operate in that manner. And I think we need to really, we're just doing so much that doesn't make any damn sense. I mean, the big thing right now is the Green Initiative, right? Well, China manufactures the solar panels. They manufacture the windmills. They manufacture everything that we would need to go to this Green Initiative, and so they're going to plant malware. They're going to plant all these things that they can spy on us, control our energy grid. They're already doing it. They do it with the energy grid right now with the transformers. These transformers, are, I mean, I can't remember. I think it was 9. Was it 9 transformers? These are massive transformers. These they're manufactured in China and delivered here. It could take years to install a new transformer. I mean, they have to take out overpasses. They're so big. Well, we don't even check those for malware or Trojan horses or any of that. In fact, Department of Energy actually they inspected one finally, and then they never released the results. So what does that tell you? On top of that, our energy grid. I mean, we cut the Keystone Pipeline. We cut even here where I live, a very affluent part of Tennessee. I mean, you can tell there's so many people are moving here that the grid can't handle it. We lose power flickers all the time here, and if you want to win the race to AI, you better have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And so we need to start thinking about nuclear. I think it even goes, I mean, and it's all, the big argument is fossil fuels versus green. Well, why is nobody talking about nuclear energy? And,
I thought they were in America.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen very many of those discussions, but...
You raise a very interesting point. Our demands for energy are going to rise very rapidly going forward. They're not going to come down. We're going to need a lot more energy. Mm-hmm. And actually, the reality is that you're not going to be able to do it in a reliable and consistent way on weather-dependent technologies. You can't do it. Mm-hmm. So it actually becomes, as you're saying, a very real issue for national security.
It's horrible. I mean...
I don't think many people realize there's a great connection there.
Well, our grid is already stressed enough as it is, and so if we want to compete in the artificial intelligence space, then we'd better get our shit together and start producing more energy. I mean, that was the whole reason that America achieved global dominance, and that's why we're quite the superpower that we are, is because of our energy, and we're losing that fast. So that would be what I would do, to start investing in our energy.
I'd be just interested in your thoughts as we round out. We're seeing a real attempt in Australia now to manipulate debate. We've got draconian misinformation and disinformation legislation in the Parliament as we're speaking here now. in an age of AI, of all of the technologies that are going on at the moment, of social media interaction and so forth, there is a lot of misinformation around. We've talked about that. But I think you might share my concerns that it would be unimaginable to have government or government agencies deciding what was misinformation and what was not. So it seems to me that we ought to be resisting government getting into the game of censorship, of misinformation and information altogether. It's just so dangerous, which raises a great need for people to be more discerning. People are going to have to be, I said we shouldn't be too cynical, but they've got to be skeptical. They've got to be smart. They've got to work out themselves who's trustworthy and who's not.
This is a tough subject because we're talking about censorship in a time where nobody knows what to believe. And so while I don't think that government stepping in and I can't remember what they called it here in the U.S. Was it the Ministry of Truth or something that they tried to start? But I'm 100% for free speech. I don't know how you solve the misinformation thing because it is obviously a severe problem in the U.S. and it stems from the regular everyday human on Twitter all the way up to legacy media is spreading lies. And so how you get a grasp on that, I would love to hear your opinion. Have you thought of that?
I don't think there's any easy answer. I think it comes down to rewarding trustworthy leaders when you can find them, not being so cynical that none of them are trustworthy because the trustworthy people won't come forward. That's where we're going to end up. So it'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're all crooks. They're all manipulative. They're all dishonest. Well, they all will be because no one good will come forward. So in the end, you see, I don't have a tops-down view of society. I have a bottoms-up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got to think carefully about your responsibilities yourself, about being a good citizen, about supporting your neighbours, raising your family properly, and not pushing up to the next level, the things that you should better do for yourself and can do better for yourself. And that way you might start to breed a more resilient society, build a more resilient society, a more focused society, one that is more, I suppose you'd say, capable of looking after itself.
So you're saying...
Because we've started looking to government for everything.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, as one American pastor said to me in one of these conversations once, we've taken God out from being above government, so government's become God. We've let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so often, instead of accepting responsibility and looking to a higher authority, I suppose you'd say, we go to an institution that really ought to be downstream of us, government, but no, we say, we're downstream of government, oh, government, help us. I think it's a terrible mistake.
So you're saying it's up to basically you're saying it's up to the parents to instill good values and beliefs in their kids, and that this will eventually work itself out.
And you will say, we haven't got time, and you'd be right.
I think that's the best answer I've heard.
I think that's a big part of it. And then, but I think we've all got to start talking about our own responsibilities again as well. And I think a part of what I'm saying is we've got to be discerning. There's a big difference between being skeptical and discerning and cynical, because then you do miss the good that's there. And if you can't build on the good, if you think it's not there, it won't be there. You can't build on it.
I mean, I think I think the problem is that we are at this point where there's two sets of values. There's the set of values that says, no, pedophilia is not okay. And then there's the other half of the country that's saying, oh no, those are minor attracted persons. We need to accept those as a is a normalized sexual preference. We have one side that is saying it's okay to dismember an 8-year-old and turn a biological male into a female. And we have another side that's saying, no, you're not doing that to my 8-year-old. I don't care what they say. We have one side that is saying, oh, my kid thinks they're a cat, and so I'm going to bring them to school in a crate, and we're going to put a little box of kitty litter in there for them to...
It's happening in Australia too.
You see what I'm saying? And so, while I 100% agree with your point, I think that we're beyond the point of, all of these people are still instilling their values and beliefs into their kids, but there's two totally separate sets of values and beliefs.
We don't believe in our own future, because kids are our future. We're not having enough of them. Families are disintegrating, and the idea of families being about kids and all the rest of it, it's coming unstuck. And all of the things you're talking about tell you that we now expect kids to be there at our whim, our fancy. They must adapt around us. We don't put their interests first. I think that is a massive problem for all of the West. It comes back to selfishness, what motivates you. You will have done a lot of deep thinking because that's the sort of man you are. A lot of the division you're now seeing in the West seems to me to have followed in the wake of the almost wholesale desertion of the Christian beliefs that gave rise to our particular type of society.
I 100% agree with you on that as well. That is exactly what I see happening. I think that, when you're talking about who runs the country, the deep state, all these things that we're talking about, transgenderism, pedophilia, in the end, nobody seems to be able to figure out who's pulling all the strings. And, I am a Christian, and I am to the point where I do think that there is a very good possibility that this is beyond any of our comprehension, and this is a battle of good versus evil. That's what
I'm sure it's a battle between good and evil. In the midst of this mess, though, you need hope. I need hope. Your kids need hope. And we seem to be without hope. And I personally believe that's what Christianity offers. It's hope, a secure hope.
Me too.
You need that to carry on.
Yes, we do.
Can we round this out? It seems to me there's a meaning void in our cultures, particularly amongst men. The stats show that. A lot of lost men in America, younger men particularly, whose lives they've not been able to get meaningful jobs. There are all sorts of reasons for that. And a lot of them they're a result of poorly thought out government policy, frankly. But the human tragedy of it is this meaning void that people slip into. They become depressed, they become anxious, they become addicted in all sorts of ways to all sorts of things. They lose their energy, they lose their mojo altogether. Suicide rates are terrible. This meaning void, perhaps, is something that we ought to turn our attention to, and I think it comes right back to the question of hope. And can you really find hope without faith?
No, you can't.
Thanks for your enormous humanity. You're a very impressive man, and I can really see why people are tapping in. So don't give up.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and it was an honor to meet you. And you, thank you.